You're listening to Miss Style, Strength, and Grace with Deidra Murphy. This is your one-stop shop for style, fashion, health, and fitness. Deidra's passion is to help empower women to reach their fullest potential, both inside and out. Deidra and her guests will be discussing how to develop your style, health, and lifestyle hacks to energize your day and inspire you to keep reaching higher levels of success. Deidra is a professional fashion stylist, health guru, and Mrs. Washington 2017. It's time to get open and honest with Deidra.
Well, hello and welcome back. Today is episode 3, and it is an episode where I am sharing how I lost the weight. So about 3 years ago, when I was at my worst with insomnia and depression, I put on close to 40 pounds, but roughly about 30 pounds on average. And I just wanted to share about how I lost the weight, just because a lot of people will ask me, like, how did you do it? Losing weight is so hard. And yeah, it is hard, but it's definitely worth it. So all throughout high school and college, I was that girl that could literally eat whatever I wanted. And I typically weighed about the same weight. It never really fluctuated more than like a pound or two up or down. And I was always so proud of the fact that I could out eat the guys that I was friends with. And I always had room for ice cream. And unfortunately, in the house that I grew up in, it was always good home cooking. My mom usually made our dinners and everything from home, but it was very carb heavy. I never knew anything other than like lasagnas. I thought all vegetables came from either the freezer or from a can. And my mom, bless her heart, has learned so much, especially later in life, about cooking and organic vegetables and just everything else that we've tried to kind of teach her from our office. But anyway, that was the life that I grew up in. And every day in high school, I remember we'd always go to Dairy Queen, not only for lunch, but then we'd even head to Dairy Queen after our football games and have, they're not Frosties, Blizzards, there we go. And I could always eat them. There was always room for ice cream. And I think just because I was so busy and so active as a youth that it never really caught up with me. I was on cheer and I was always active and on the go. I also had a high school job. So I would go from cheerleading practice in the afternoons to working my retail job at night. And thankfully it never really caught up with me. Even in college, I never really put on that much weight, even though there was like the freshman 15. I didn't really get that just because, again, I was so active. And like I said, it didn't catch up with me. Well, no matter what, like putting toxic garbage into your system year after year after year, it will eventually catch up with you. And unfortunately for me, it caught up with me in my young 20s. If you listen to episode 1, I explained kind of when I lost my health. So I guess it all started about almost 4 years ago now. I was in this really bad headspace. So I put on weight because of my severe insomnia and depression. I was not sleeping. I only slept about 1 to 2 hours a day. And that left me in a severe hole with depression, addicted to anti-anxiety medications, and then severe hormonal imbalances. So with all of that, then I also gained about 30 pounds on top of that, and I just had no energy. So I didn't work out. I wasn't eating healthy. I was grabbing meals on the go, from, restaurants or to takeout and that kind of thing. And I just was in a really negative headspace. So when I finally decided to, turn my life around, it was really hard. And I even developed a late in life eating disorder. And that's not something that I'm proud of. And I haven't really told that to many people. In all honesty, the only one that to this point has really known has been my husband. And I think most girls or women that do develop an eating disorder, and I could have this completely wrong, but at least to me, it would make sense that most girls that do develop an eating disorder do so at a young age. So whether that be preteen or teenager or even young 20-something, it seems to come on kind of early if you're going to develop an eating disorder. Well, mine started in my late 20s because I was dealing with all this insomnia and not sleeping, and I would develop this nasty, vicious cycle where I was so depressed that I would go and binge eat. I remember nights where there was one weekend in particular, my husband was out of town and I was really, really depressed because I was sad and lonely and overweight. And I went and I got 2 pints of Ben and Jerry's plus brownies. I ate the whole thing by myself. I don't even want to know how many calories that was all in all. And then I felt guilty because A, I'd gotten to the point where I was like sick because I'd eaten so much, but B, then I felt guilty on top of it. And that's when I first purged. And I never thought I would be that woman or that girl that could ever purposefully try to get rid of the food she had just eaten in a very unhealthy manner. And it's only, it was late in life that I developed that. And it was really, really hard for me to snap myself out of that. And again, if you go back to episode 1 of my podcast, I remember the night where I drew a line in the sand. And it was the night where I was trying to get a good night's rest. It wasn't happening. It was about 6 a.m. in the morning, and I was in the guest bedroom because I couldn't sleep next to my husband. And I remember just like crying out to the Lord and God and saying like, why are you doing this to me? I felt like I was this victim, and I was just this poor me mentality. And I remember thinking, if I could just fall asleep, even if I was to pass away in the middle of the night, at least I would have some rest and be able to catch up on sleep. And when I realized I was having these awful negative thoughts, that's when I drew the line in the sand. And I realized that I had to start implementing what we call the 5 foundations of health. So my husband is a chiropractor, and we have a full holistic health and wellness clinic here in Tri-Cities, Washington, also a weight loss business as well. But the biggest thing that we teach our patients is what we call the 5 foundations. So the 5 foundations are food, what you're putting in your body; function, so the nervous system, how well is your nervous system able to adapt; filter, so that would be like minimizing the amount of toxins that we're putting into our system and surrounding ourselves with; but even fitness. So not only working out, but fitness, how fit are you? And like, what are you doing for your system in a way that's going to benefit you, working out in a way that's actually helpful to your body, not harmful. And there's ways to do that are good and bad, so I learned a lot about circuit style training, and then also freedom. So freedom in your mind, freedom in educating yourself, and just learning and growing as a human being. So it wasn't until I really started to implement these 5 foundations that we already taught and that I already knew to be true, but I wasn't really practicing. So I hadn't been getting adjusted regularly by my husband, who was a chiropractor. You would think like, oh, she lives with a chiropractor, she must get adjusted all the time. No, I really wasn't. And I was letting my nervous system get out of balance again. Long story short, I had a very minimal form of scoliosis. I mean, you wouldn't notice it by the naked eye, but according to my x-rays, and once my husband took x-rays and marked everything, he was like, did you not know that you had scoliosis? And I was like, no. So we were able to correctively fix that with his type of chiropractic that we practice. And then I also had a reverse curve in my upper neck, and thankfully we were able to get a lot of that curvature back. But when I was in this deep hole, depression, insomnia, I wasn't getting adjusted. So those patterns in my neck and my spine started going back, and I started losing all the ground that we had made in the corrective chiropractic. And not only that, like I said earlier, I wasn't eating right. I was never working out. I was completely bombarding myself with toxins, not only with like the products that I was using, but even, the food I was putting in my body. And then mentally, I was just in a horrible space. So I started to implement these things slowly but surely. How do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time. Even when I was at my worst and I was only sleeping like 1 to 2 hours a day, I started getting a little bit of exercise in, maybe just a walk with my dog in the park, or, getting like a 10-minute run in or just something. And then I even took it as far as to join a CrossFit gym, because I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. And I started out only going like 3 days a week, but it was enough to help, get me out of the house, get me into this style of workout that was the circuit style, like high intensity, short duration. Most of the CrossFit style workouts were only like 15 to 20 minutes long, but it was enough to help reset my hormones and help my body start to get into fat burning mode again. And I started learning more about lifting and like what it actually means to lift weights. I never lifted a weight before. Before that, all my exercises, I thought just going on a run or being on the elliptical was all it took to get like the body of your dreams. And it did suck when I was like super tired and I needed to go work out, but I had to start making those choices. And then I had to start packing my meals, like being intentional with what I was eating. And I wasn't at that time, tracking calories or macros or anything like that, but I was just making sure I ate. The term clean eating definitely has some resonating truth to me. And so by that, it meant like I was eating organic, I was eating free range meats, making sure that I wasn't like eating a ton of sugar. Most of my sugars either came from berries that I would put in my smoothies or like an apple that I would have later in the day. So very, very minimal sources of sugars. And then, as I started to make these changes, I started transitioning how my brain was functioning too. So I would start reading at night and like turning off all my devices. I know that sounds like hard to do, but I was like making sure my phone was in a different room on airplane mode so that people couldn't bug me, because if I couldn't get sleep, I was never going to lose the weight. And if I couldn't get my hormones to reset, I was never going to get healthy again. And so speaking of hormones, I even did a supplement protocol where we did testing before, during, and after. And I had a supplement that was all natural, the supplement protocol. And I was taking these supplements like 3 or 4 times a day, a ton of pills to help naturally rebalance my hormones so that I was getting peaks and falls during the right times during the day. And that's what really started getting my energy back so that I could, have the energy during the day, but then have those falls at night and actually start to rest. So once I started to rest and I was working out at least like 3 to 4 days a week and then eating clean, that's when I started to lose the weight, maybe a pound or 2 a week. And it started to slowly come off and I started to feel better about myself. And that's when, you get that momentum going, right? Like you've been at it for like a couple weeks and you see that you're down like a couple pounds and like, you're like, yes, I'm in a good headspace. Things are actually working. Things are actually improving. And that's when you get that momentum going and you can actually start to see the finish line versus just, feeling like a hamster on the wheel. Like I keep doing all the right things, but nothing is changing. Nothing's working. And I had been there, when I wasn't sleeping and I wasn't getting any rest, no matter what, I wasn't losing weight. Like I said, at one point I was literally just eating vegetables and chicken and I was still gaining weight on top of that. Like, how much does that suck, right? You're like, I'm having just another broccoli salad with my plain chicken again, and I'm still gaining weight. And that, caused a lot of other bad mental spaces for my head as well. That's when I was like, oh, screw it. I'm just going to eat cake and cookies. But anyway, my point is, you have to start one bite at a time, start with one thing. So maybe if it's for you, maybe it is just like getting in a little bit of exercise every day, even if it is like 10 to 15 minutes, doing something is better than nothing, and starting to implement that circuit style, HIIT, high intensity interval training, whatever that looks like for you, to get yourself motivated again. And what's nice about like the circuit style or burst circuit style training is it actually helps increase your fat burning hormones. So for 24 to 48 hours actually after finishing a short, intense workout, you're actually still burning fat, versus if you're going on the treadmill for like 2 hours, you're burning fat during that 2 hours, but as soon as you get off, you're done burning fat and you actually stimulate your appetite. So we can talk more about that in a future podcast as far as like, okay, what's the right style of exercise and how do you do it properly? But start moving. And then the other thing is, be intentional with what you're eating. If that means that you have to meal prep on one day out of the week and pack your food with you every day, then maybe that's what it takes, as you start to get that forward momentum and it becomes easier after that. And then even making those switches when you go out to eat, if you are going out to eat, even on the weekend, because I know that's when we all start to feel like we've took 3 steps forward during the week and then we take 5 back on the weekend. It's because we go out to eat and we don't know exactly what they're putting in the food. They're drenching our salads with all this dressing that we don't really need, or they're cooking everything really, really fatty. And again, not that I'm against fats, because I love good fats, and there's actually a way to get into ketosis, which is fat burning mode, by using the proper fats. But a lot of times restaurants are using trans fats, which aren't the best for us, and we just don't really know what they're putting in there, or they're putting really carb heavy items on their dishes. So rather than having like the really carb heavy French fries or rice or whatever it is that's coming with your meal, maybe say, hey, can I swap out the French fries for a side salad, or for the mixed veggies or the seasonal vegetables of the night? And that's a way to still feel full and get those nutrients that your body needs, but without having like the high carb load and the high calorie count to go along with it. And you'll still be actually satisfied. And how satisfying is it at the end of the weekend? You step on the scale Monday and you've either maintained all that weight that you lost or even continued to lose weight over the weekend. Like, nothing beats that feeling when you're trying to make personal goals and progress when it comes to weight loss. To, maintain over the weekend or even continue to lose over the weekend is such an inspiring feeling. So I just encourage you to make those positive choices. Sometimes I had to be that person that when I would go out to eat with friends or family for like an event, maybe I didn't really eat at the restaurant, or I ate beforehand so that I would go into the situation not really feeling hungry, so that I wasn't famished and I didn't make poor choices. Or having food with me for afterwards, like knowing, okay, on the way home, that's when I'm going to munch on like my veggies that I have in my bag, or the apple that I have, because I know that's going to be filling and it's going to be healthy and I know what's going into my body. So just always, having a plan. That's the biggest thing too, is I think having a plan of what you're going to do in any given situation, whether it's a birthday party or especially the holiday parties when all the fun, yummy foods are out, picking a plan and sticking to it. So, and that doesn't mean you can never have like a treat here and there, but maybe it's like choosing those treats strategically. So for instance, I was on this path of like weight loss, and I knew my husband and my wedding anniversary was coming up. And so we usually go out to dinner, especially to my favorite seafood restaurant. And so the day of, I'd been on this track and I had slowly been losing the weight. I was down about 10 pounds. I still wanted to lose another 20, but I knew that if I went out to dinner, I didn't want to ruin all the progress that I had made during the week. And we went out to my favorite restaurant. So earlier in the day, I knew like, hey, I want to have the salmon, and I know that I'm going to want to split a dessert with my husband. So like during the day, I still ate, but I mainly focused on like getting in good veggies and filling up with those really fibrous foods from my like apples and vegetables. So then when we went out to dinner, I had room for that higher fat content salmon. I swapped out the carb side dish for more veggies. And then rather than getting my own dessert and eating the whole thing, because goodness knows I probably could have, and I would have ate the whole thing without sharing, we split a dessert. And the next morning, it just was really empowering to step on the scale and know and actually see it on the scale like, hey, I didn't gain weight and I made all this progress all week long, and I was able to maintain it, but still enjoy a romantic evening out with my husband and live in the moment. And I think that's what it all kind of boils down to, is like still finding that balance so you can live life and have balance. We never want to just be that person that's like, no, I can't go because I can't eat the food there. Well, still go, have a plan, have a snack or two beforehand so you're not super hungry, and then have a game plan for during it. And, maybe that means like having an accountability person in your life where you can, check in with them on a weekly basis and say, hey, like, this is what I ate last week and here's where I'm at, like weigh in, or that kind of thing as well. For instance, I had my sister-in-law, luckily, was a personal trainer at the time, and she did a ton of workout videos, and I would do those workout videos like at home so I could get some new ideas on different workouts that I could do without weights or without having a gym membership. And she became that like accountability person for me. So I would check in with her at the beginning of the week, like, hey, this is where I'm at weight wise. Here's what I did last week for workouts. And this is my goal for this week. And then I would check back in again the next Monday. So it was just nice to have that accountability person that wasn't my husband, because I could, easily kind of scuff that off, versus when it was somebody like outside of my immediate family, I knew that I had to be accountable to that person. So that was all. And about 3 years ago that I was finally able to kind of lose all that weight, and I started to learn how to feel confident again. I got energy back and learned how to nourish my body. So I was eating in order to live, not living to eat. So if you have questions on this, I would love to answer them for you. Like, definitely email me. You can email me at Deidra@stylebydeidra.com, and I would love to answer future questions for you when it comes to healthy eating, working out, that kind of, that whole realm. And I'll definitely be sharing more too, because, that first year losing the weight, I got down to my like normal-ish weight. It was like 135, which was still a little bit higher than, let's say, what I was on my wedding day. Why is it that we always compare ourselves to the weights we are at for certain rites of passages? You're like, oh, I was this weight on the night of prom, and I was this weight on my wedding day. But anyway, I guess that's just how we mark our lives. And anyway, when I finally won Mrs. Washington this year in 2017, I beat that goal of my weight, and I felt really healthy and really confident on the stage at Mrs. Washington. And then this summer, I wanted to take it up a notch. And that's when I really learned how to sculpt my body in a way that was healthy and positive. And I was able to get down to 118 pounds. And I, like I said, I did it the healthy way, and I got down to 10% body fat just because I wanted to be as lean as possible for my national competition for Mrs. America. Now, granted, like, I didn't want to sustain that, so I'm no longer at that, but for being on stage for a certain show and appearance, like, it made sense. But that's not what I wanted to have longevity wise. So anyway, if you have questions, definitely email me. I would love to talk more about this with you. So with this podcast, I'm doing style, strength, and grace. So talking fashion, style, healthy living, and then even going into pageants more as well. So be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you can get notifications of whenever we're releasing the new podcasts. Also, rate and review. I would love to hear your feedback on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, whatever your platform is that you're listening to this. And be sure to check out the show notes and other free resources on my website at stylbydeidra.com. Thanks, everybody, and I love you all. With style, strength, and grace, Deidra Murphy. Mwah!
Hey ladies, thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. To help empower more women, please be a doll and rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. For show notes and other free resources we mentioned today, go to stylbydeidra.com.